Our lives are filled with distractions. Email, Twitter, texting. We're constantly connected to technology, rarely alone with just our thoughts, which is probably why there's a growing movement in America to train people to get around the stresses of daily life. It's a practice called mindfulness.
I believe that the entry point for living a more conscious life is mindfulness.
I would urge you all to start practicing mindfulness right away.
What is your favorite thing about racing?
I think the mindfulness of it is what I really enjoy the most, because you really have to be focused on the here and the now.
When this year's top buzzwords are compiled, mindfulness will surely be close to the top of the list.
So Angie, in the video you talked a little bit about mindfulness. So could you tell us a little bit more about what it is and how it works?
What we're talking about is called mindfulness meditation, and people who do it believe that it makes their brains healthier and fitter.
I grew up in Alaska. My mom left when I was 8. My dad took over raising my brothers and I. We moved to the homestead where my dad had been raised. He was raised in an abusive household and went to Vietnam, picked up some more trauma. And he began drinking to try and medicate his anxiety, and it didn't go well for him. He became abusive, and I ended up moving out at 15. I knew when I moved out at 15 that statistically I should end up repeating the cycle. As much as we get a genetic inheritance, we get an emotional inheritance. And if you look at my family's emotional inheritance, it leads to substance abuse or alcoholism or physical abuse. I didn't want that to be me. I wanted to avoid being a statistic. After I graduated high school, I ended up in San Diego, where my mom was. I went to take care of her. I was working in a computer warehouse. My boss took me aside to have a talk with me, and I realized he was propositioning me. And I turned him down, and when I wouldn't have sex with him, he wouldn't give me my paycheck, and I wasn't able to make rent. And so my mom and I began living in our cars. My car ended up getting stolen. I ended up being homeless for a year. I was having panic attacks and stealing and wasn't doing well. Somewhere between the age of 15, when I said I would never be a statistic, to 18, 3 short years later, I was a statistic. I was homeless and gonna end up in jail or dead. I quit believing in myself. And so I had to get very, very serious about my thoughts.
The combat mission may technically be over, but for anyone who thinks the danger is over, consider that there have been 560 IED explosions in Iraq in just the past month.
I had spent a lot of time after 9/11 in war zones, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, Iraq, many times in Iraq. Do you feel like the war is over?
Yeah, eventually, sir.
We're combat troops. We're still here. We've still got a job to do.
And I had come home and gotten depressed, and I was insufficiently self-aware to even know that I was depressed. And I made this very dumb decision to self-medicate with recreational drugs, including cocaine, ecstasy.
Even though I hadn't been doing drugs every day or anything like that, it was enough to artificially raise the level of adrenaline in my brain to change my brain chemistry and made it much more likely for me to have a panic attack.
Now, one of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer.
And I was anchoring the news updates on Good Morning America. That's that person who comes on at the top of the hour and delivers the headlines. And just a few seconds into my spiel, I just lost it.
But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
My heart was racing, my lungs seized up, My palms were sweating. My mind was racing. I actually just couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak anymore. So I had to quit right in the middle, and that was really embarrassing.
That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie.
The backstory is even more embarrassing because when I went to see a doctor about it, he asked me a bunch of questions. One of the questions was, do you do drugs? And I said, yeah, I do. And he leaned back in the chair and gave me this look that communicated the following sentiment. Okay, asshole, mystery solved.
I loved to run, whether it was cross country, playing basketball and jump and just be engaged physically. There's something magical about that. There's something magical about being in flow where things are just happening and it's like you're not there, but you're right in it. You are it. So when I was in college, I was actually rooming with Dr. J at the time, Drew Irving, like at UMass, and we were preseason just playing with the team and I got injured. I had ankle injury and pretty much ended my career, and I didn't really know who I was if I wasn't playing basketball because I was one of these quiet types that let my game do my talking for me. Being an athlete all my life and loving to run and loving to compete and having the camaraderie of being with a group of people that had a common purpose, that was very challenging for me to get away from all of that, and that's when I started, the pain medicine. I started abusing that, then getting into drugs and alcohol.
My parents split up when I was 4. My mother died when I was 9. I lived with my father's parents after that, whom I hardly knew. My father came back briefly. I hadn't seen him since I was 4, and by now I'm like 11, and he was like a different person, and took an overdose of sleeping pills, and he didn't die, but he spent the rest of his life in some mental health facility or another. And I'd lived in 5 different family configurations, and every one of them had been switched because of trauma or loss or something like that. And so I was terribly unhappy and afraid and angry, but I didn't quite know what was going on within me. I just knew it didn't feel really good.
The pace of life seems to be accelerating.
So we've got that major accident, H1 eastbound. It's after White Mountain.
It's actually the most polluted city in America.
So expect the delays and all first responders on the scene.
We're more connected to information, but less connected to each other. In these increasingly uncertain times, a growing number of people have discovered a surprisingly effective antidote: mindfulness. Mindfulness comes in 2 forms. One is a specific type of meditation, mindfulness meditation.
Every time you put your mind on your breath and then it wanders, that's what the mind does, and you notice it wandered, and then you bring it back, you're strengthening the neural circuitry for paying attention. This is quite a parallel with going to the gym and lifting weights. Every time you lift that weight, every repetition strengthens that muscle just a little bit more.
Among novice practitioners, we saw changes in the brain after just 2 weeks of practice. This was a kind of proof of concept study that underscored how quickly these changes can arise.
Strengthening that mental muscle builds an ongoing quality of attention simply known as mindfulness.
The way I define mindfulness is paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness and curiosity and a willingness to be with what is. So it's a quality of attention that we can have at any moment, whether we're walking down the street or talking to a friend or eating or brushing our teeth. We can bring that quality of awareness to our experience.
We just start making better decisions for ourselves and others. We start taking better care of ourselves. We feel better about ourselves. We generally feel better about other people. We just become more relational, more empathic. And, so I think that's all good.
When you're aware of a sensory experience while you're happening it without the compulsive activity of the mind to define it, is a very wonderful state to be in because it's a state of peace.
And it offers us degrees of freedom so that we can navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life. There's no moment that's not a wonderful moment for mindfulness.
I'm a big believer in the growth of mindfulness, that mindfulness can change the world.
Some people still associate meditation and mindfulness with the 1960s. During the rise of hippie culture and an influx of yogis and gurus from the East. But in the 1970s, a small number of young scientists and other seekers began to explore different types of meditation in a more analytical way.
As I was studying to become a scientist at MIT in molecular biology, it also was very important to me to try to bring that other stream of my own meditation practice together with what I was understanding about science and the universe. I did have an experience back in the late 70s of being on a 2-week meditation retreat at the Insight Meditation Center. One day, at about the 10th day of this retreat, sitting alone in my room, meditating, I had a vision of what might be possible that had to do with bringing what I was learning and practicing at this retreat center, which was a very Buddhist place, into the mainstream of the world. Since I happened to be already working in a laboratory at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, I thought, what a perfect place to do it. Bring it into a hospital. Nobody wants to go there unless they are really suffering beyond a certain point where they can't deny it anymore. I started to seek out physicians, asking, what percentage of your patients do you feel you actually help? And I was astonished by the answers that they would say, well, maybe 10%, maybe 15%. And I was like, my God, what happens to the rest? They say, well, they either get better on their own, but for the most part, they just never get better.
John found a few doctors willing to refer their chronic patients, and the Stress Reduction Clinic was born.
I would say, listen, from our point of view, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. And what we're going to do is pour energy and attention into your experience in the form of mindfulness, in the form of wakefulness, in the form of present moment awareness, and see what happens over the course of 8 weeks. You could see people transform. The doctors would say, they say, I don't know what you did with Mrs. So-and-so, but you were able to help her more in 8 weeks than I've been able to help her in 8 years. And I would just smile and say, well, actually, I didn't do anything. She did it herself.
John called his 8-week course Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, or MBSR. 4 decades later, MBSR courses are now offered in thousands of hospitals and other facilities around the world. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been transformed.
I want you to meditate in a way that is a love affair for you. Because it's not like, oh God, I promised I'd wake up for the next 50 years early in the morning and meditate my ass off before I go to work. It took me a long time to realize this is actually a love affair. Just taking my seat, it's kind of a love affair with the actuality of things as they are, not as we or I would want them to be. It's absolutely essential that it is understood that mindfulness is intrinsically an ethical practice. How would you even know if you're doing harm unless you're aware, unless you're awake, unless you're mindful of your impulses to control? You're engaging in the meditation practice for the sake of, as they say, all being.
The retreat center where John had his epiphany for how to bring mindfulness into the mainstream was co-founded by the woman who grew up as a depressed, angry girl in Buffalo.
When I was a sophomore in college, I took an Asian philosophy course. I had a philosophy requirement, and I just chose that one because it was convenient to my schedule. And of course, the course completely changed my life. It was in the context of the course. I heard about the prospect of meditation practice. I heard there were actual practical tools you could use that could change your mind, that could make you a lot happier. And it was a question of finding them and actually practicing them. The school had an independent study program. I created a project. I said, I want to go to India and study meditation. And they approved it, so off I went. And I began my meditation practice in January 1971. The first night of the retreat was difficult. I couldn't focus, and I was very young. I was 18, and I was very distraught and fragmented, and I'd been through a lot in my life. I was extremely judgmental, and I'm somewhat famous for once having marched up to Goenka, my first teacher, and looking him in the eye and saying, I never used to be an angry person before I started meditating, thereby laying blame exactly where I felt it belonged, which was on him, of course. And I'd been hugely angry, but I didn't quite know it. And so there were sort of two parallel processes. One was discovery. What am I feeling? What is the truth of my experience? You know, layer, under layer, under layer. And the other part was being kind to myself and compassionate to myself rather than so judgmental in that discovery. And it was only after that, I think, that the whole emphasis on kindness toward oneself broadened and became a real effort to understand the nature of kindness and the power of kindness toward others as well. It still remains like the pivotal turning point of my life.
When Sharon returned to America, she taught 1 to 2 week retreats with Joseph Goldstein, who she'd met in India, and Jack Kornfield.
Some combination of us would go and teach the retreat, and then it would end, and we never knew if there'd be another retreat until we were sleeping on people's couches.
Eventually, Sharon, Joseph, and Jack found a former Catholic seminary building in Barre, Massachusetts, and scraped together money through fundraising and loans to create the Insight Meditation Society, America's first permanent retreat center started by Westerners.
We moved in Valentine's Day, 1976. Up above the doorway, when we first looked at the building, it said Fathers of the Blessed Sacrament. And when we moved in, we asked someone to get up on a very tall ladder on a very cold day, and we said, could you please rearrange those letters so it says something about us? And he came up with Metta, M-E-T-T-A, which means loving kindness, or friendship, or love.
When I was a graduate student at Harvard, I got a traveling fellowship to go to India. It's quite an interesting accident of history that the people I bumped into by accident have now become really the leaders of the mindfulness movement in America, like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg and maybe 3 or 4 other people who are now leading teachers of mindfulness.
Please join me in welcoming Daniel Goleman.
I began to feel there's something very important going on here.
And it was off the map of psychology then. As a clinical psychologist, I was learning how to meet someone and figure out what was wrong with them. That was what clinical psych was about. Here, it was what could be right about people. It was the upside of human potential. So I was very excited. I went back to Harvard and I said, hey, guess what? There's an upside to human potential, and it all seems to have to do with meditation. Isn't that great? No, that's probably a career-ending move, they said.
And for me, it was, because after coming back and teaching a bit, then I went into science journalism. And one of the things I always wanted to write about was the scientific benefits of mindfulness and meditation.
Daniel became a best-selling author, starting with his 1995 paradigm-shifting book, Emotional Intelligence. His latest book, Altered Traits, co-authored with neuroscientist Richard Davidson, examines the scientific evidence.
When we started out, way back, there were 3 articles that were published in the scientific literature on any kind of meditation that we could cite. Now there are more than 6,000. In the last 5 years, it's just been practically exponential growth. Today, there are more than 1,000 a year.
Here's the good news. Right at the beginning, there are very, very positive benefits. You know, people check their email more than 70 times a day on average. They check their Facebook more than 20 times a day. Every time you bring your mind back, it seems, at least theoretically, the circuitry for paying full attention and monitoring mind wandering gets stronger. One of the other findings about beginning meditation is that you're triggered less, you recover more quickly. And when you're triggered, you get less upset. And there is some very good suggestive evidence from UCLA that meditation slows the aging of the brain. People who we call long-term practitioners. If you do a day retreat, like 6 to 8 hours of meditation, something happens to your genes. And what happens is that all of the genes that create, or 100 or more genes that create inflammation in the body, downregulate. They go quiet. And this is really interesting medically, because chronic inflammation is one of the at-cause factors in a whole range of diseases, from diabetes and arthritis to heart disease and so on. So after all these years, and despite what my professors at Harvard told me, I'm very happy that I've followed this, pursued mindfulness, pursued meditation, and I think that we've been vindicated by the evidence. And thank you very much for coming tonight. Richard Davidson, however, was ready to listen to what I had to say, and we've been lifelong friends since.
After my second year of graduate school in 1974, I went off to India for the first time to get a taste of meditation practice. When I returned from India, I came back with a conviction that meditation was something very important for Western psychology and neuroscience to embrace, and a fervent aspiration to pursue research in this area. But it was made very clear to me that if I wanted a successful career in science, this was an absolutely terrible way to begin, and I had better find something else to study.
For years, Richard stuck to basic research, until one fateful meeting.
When I first met the Dalai Lama in 1992, he challenged me and he said, "You've been using tools of modern neuroscience to investigate stress and anxiety and depression and adversity. Why can't you use those same tools to study kindness and compassion?" And that was a wake-up call. I didn't have a very good answer for him. And he said, "I want you to take these practices out of their religious context, bring them into the laboratory, and if you find that they're valuable, disseminate them to the world." And that was my assignment for the rest of my life.
What Richard and others at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Center for Healthy Minds have discovered is that meditation has the power to rewire and restructure the brain.
We first began to look at very long-term meditation practitioners. These were individuals who spent years training their mind. Sure enough, when we did those studies, we found that their brains were quite different from the brains of ordinary individuals. What we're looking at here is a representation of a larger body of research that depicts how mindfulness meditation works in the brain. The moment we're lost and recognize it, the moment of recognition engages the salience network. And one of the nodes of the salience network is the anterior insula. A second important node is the anterior cingulate cortex. Those parts of the brain are critical in this monitoring function. Then what happens is we want to reorient our awareness, bring it back to the breath, and that requires the engagement of a prefrontal network that directs attention and the parietal lobe. And so we then direct attention back to the breath in a process of reorienting. And then we can sustain our focus of attention, and the sustaining it also involves the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, let's get started. If you want to lay down and be careful.
What we envision is that we are providing people with lifelong skills that they'll continue to use over and over again, and it's through continued practice that enduring change can occur.
When you become aware that you're distracted, then gently bring your awareness back to your breathing. To be aware of a thought as it arises and falls, or any other experience, a perception, choice, sensation, all does the same thing. You realize that you, as a being, are not a thought.
Deepak Chopra began his professional life as a board-certified physician. Then, in 1985, just as John Kabat-Zinn, Daniel Goleman, and others had done, Deepak decided to focus more on what was right with people instead of what was wrong.
As a medical doctor, I was always interested in healing. And you can't do that by looking at the human body in a very fragmented way as a physical machine. So I just extended my understanding of healing. It's a natural progression.
Deepak's insights on healing, well-being, and other topics have led to more than 80 books, as well as speaking engagements around the world.
Species. In the midst of all these sounds, and my voice, and the sensations, and the breath, in the midst of this, keeping your awareness in your heart, mentally ask the question, who am I? The word mindfulness in itself is a little misleading because it implies a full mind. And awarefulness would be an awkward, clumsy word, so we'll keep the word mindfulness. But every experience that we have, this experience, is illuminated by the light of awareness. And then the compulsion to say this is good, this is bad, to judge, to label, all of that increases the activity of the mind. That restless activity of the mind ultimately is the cause of all stress. But when you're embedded as awareness, as the loving presence in which all is happening, that's a state of perfect homeostasis, perfect equilibrium.
More schools are adding mindfulness, meditation, and even yoga to their curriculum to help kids develop coping skills that can last a lifetime.
Mind Up founder and creator, actress Goldie Hawn, believes that when children better understand how their brains work, they can better handle their emotions.
I wanted it to be woven in to the tapestry of their day.
Some scientists suggest a brain training technique called mindfulness could help teenagers manage stress.
I were little kids. My parents were heavily into yoga and meditation and contemplative practices, Ayurvedic cooking and being vegan back then. So our dad would wake us up every morning and make us meditate before school.
We thought it was weird as I don't know what. And honestly, we kind of kept it in the house. And we kind of called ourselves like closet meditators because we had to like keep it secret from everybody else.
During college, the Smith brothers met a kindred spirit in Andres Gonzalez. They returned to the crime and poverty of West Baltimore, determined to provide children with positive life skills.
And having the two of them with me through this journey was extremely powerful because, we struggled a lot at the beginning. It's a good 8, 9 years of doing this for free and a lot of judgment being passed on to us and people asking us, what are you doing with yourselves? Why don't you get a real job?
We were presented with the opportunity to coach football for some 5th grade boys at an elementary school, and we decided to do an after-school yoga program, and things kind of took on a life of their own from there.
That success gradually led to other programs featuring yoga and mindfulness, both after school and during the school day.
There's one young lady in particular that I really wanted to see if this program would benefit her. After the program had been in session for about 4 months, she came in my office one day and closed the door and said, "Today makes a difference in my life. I'm not going to get in trouble anymore. I'm going to use what I've been learning in the after-school program."
Are we ready for our mindful moment?
Now every day at Robert Coleman Elementary starts with a series of exercises known as the Mindful Moment.
Toes, if any thoughts of the past come into mind, just let it go.
One thing we realize is a lot of times children are traumatized before they get here.
And during the day, teachers can refer any kids who are struggling to the Mindful Moment room.
They're not going to the office, they're coming here. And last year we had close to 1,300 referrals. So that's 1,300 times that kids came to us and we were able to work with them and able to return them to class focused and ready to learn.
In order for us to have a focused and calm day, we know that we have to start with mindful moments.
One thing they want to teach us, control your anger, do some couple deep breathing, and don't fight.
On the other side of Baltimore, at Patterson High School, Principal Vance Benton knows firsthand that the program works with older kids too.
And we have it every morning, 12 to 15 minutes. It's going on the PA. The mindfulness room is also open all day. So children can self-refer, come on in and get some mindfulness. Teachers can refer students at any point in time and get 20 minutes and get on back to class. Being that we have a lot of students from other countries fleeing their village, they also experience the same things our Baltimore City students are experiencing in terms of death and violence. I want the children to have something that they can always have with them beyond the school day.
Now, the Holistic Life Foundation serves more than 7,000 kids at over 40 different Baltimore public schools.
Once they love themselves, then you see it start to ripple out. We see them start to treat their friends differently, their teachers differently, their principal differently. It has to start within, and it kind of just reverberates out and it starts to affect the entire community.
The Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA started in 2006. So when we teach in institutions, we definitely do not want it being perceived as religious, and it's not. The teachings are rooted in Buddhism, but they're not Buddhist. They're what it means to be human. We have free drop-ins all over campus all the time, and we also go out to the public.
Welcome, everyone, to our Thursday Mindful Awareness Meditation. If we were to check into our mind at any point in the day, we would probably notice that we're in the past, replaying things, wishing they hadn't happened, going over them, thinking I could have done them differently, or we're planning for the future. What am I going to be doing? Obsessing about it, catastrophizing. So mindfulness is this invitation to the here and now. And people report that when they're more present, there's a sense of connection, of gratitude, of presence, of awareness that really begins to infiltrate their lives. So what we're doing here really is a training ground for being mindful throughout the day. But let's get started. We can begin with a few deep breaths. And now we'll begin the process of paying attention to moment after moment, breath after breath. As you do this, you may notice that your attention wanders. You can stay with a breath or two, and then you find yourself lost in thought. This is actually completely normal. You're not doing anything wrong. This is what happens with the human mind. Gently redirect your attention back to your main focus. That moment of recognizing that you're lost in thought is actually a moment of mindfulness. So you just keep redirecting. You get lost in thought, you come back to your breathing, and you just keep doing it.
I'm trying to get people to come with me because I think it would benefit a lot of people because it crosses boundaries of age and background, and it's really like universal in helping people.
I am a mom. This is how I take care of me so that I can be present, but I can also help everyone else that I am responsible for.
I was hired originally to work on a grant on a research study of mindfulness for ADHD. When we did the study with ADHD, there was actually a statistical significance that mindfulness helped kids and adults pay attention, so much so that the scientists who reviewed the data looked at it and said, "What medication did you put them on?" And we said, "No, meditation." One of the studies we did with insomnia, we had older adults with insomnia, and there again was pretty good results in terms of people's ability to fall asleep and less rumination, less depression.
Following his panic attack on live television and admitted drug use, ABC's Dan Harris was searching for help.
My wife gave me a book about Buddhism. I was hooked. I was really hooked. And my problem at that point was the Buddha, what he was recommending, sounded utterly repellent, and that was meditation. Because I was of the view that meditation was for freaks and hippies and people who are really into Enya and aromatherapy. I describe myself as a fidgety skeptic. I don't know where I came up with that, but it's true. You know, it's hard for me to sit still. And I was raised by secular scientists. I'm married to a scientist. I'm very skeptical of stuff that you can't prove. When I started to see that there is the science that suggests that meditation is really good for you, that really began to change my attitude about it. The other thing that really changed my mind is that it's simple. You don't have to sit in a funny position. You don't have to join a group. You don't have to believe in anything. It's simple and secular.
Dan was also surprised to find himself becoming an advocate.
One of my colleagues was saying, essentially, you know, what's the matter with you? What used to be cool? Why are you meditating? And I was at a loss, and I said, oh, you know, it makes me about 10% happier. And I could see the look on her face transform from scorn to something approaching interest. And I thought, that's my shtick. I called the book that, and that's grown into a podcast and an app and more books that has resulted from this wisecrack around the office. I'm struck by the absurdity of it. But I think there's something there in that people were ready for a reasonable claim.
In the 10% Happier app, we teach you how to train your mind through meditation, a practice that is simple, secular, and scientifically validated. In my experience, it's a game changer.
It's not magic. It takes work, but it's worth the investment, and it will pay off over time. You should get marginally better at being awake and not on autopilot for the rest of your life. Really, to me, it's about this meditation cliche of respond, not react. You learn how to respond wisely to things instead of reacting blindly.
Long before singer-songwriter Jewel had even heard the word mindfulness, she was a homeless teen suffering from panic attacks.
I had to develop a lot of strategies while I was homeless to survive. How to rewire a lot of the self-defeating thoughts that I had. What was I thinking? Could you choose your thoughts? And I began to look at curating my thoughts much more carefully than I cared about any other thing. That put me in the driver's seat. It meant I wasn't a victim of my brain.
One of the strategies Jewel developed on the streets is called antidote thoughts.
A thought that plagued me a lot was that I didn't know what I was doing, and that would send me into a tailspin multiple times in my life. I would just start by coming up with what is the opposite of that. The opposite is I know what I'm doing. Well, that was a lie, but I was capable of learning. So that became my antidote. I'm capable of learning, and I won't give up till I do.
Another of Jewel's self-taught techniques led to one of her most successful songs after she was discovered by a record producer while playing in a coffee shop.
I decided to start watching my hands because the hands are the servants of your thought. By forcing myself to be observant in real time of my hands, I made myself present in the moment. And when I did that, my anxiety calms down. Hands really is one of my odes to mindfulness. Pretty much all of my songs are about me learning to become a whole human, to live my life mindfully with presence being the driver of my life.
Jewel's ability to live mindfully was tested when just a few years after being homeless, her first album sold millions of copies.
You take a girl with my background and you throw fame or even possibly money in the mix, and it usually is a recipe for disaster. And so I had to really get in touch with that and come up with a strategy for that. For me, it was leading with vulnerability, telling the truth, talking to people about my flaws, never making myself seem more perfect than I was, so that I had an honest representation of myself as I started my career. Thank you.
Following an injury, George Mumford went from playing basketball at the University of Massachusetts with future Hall of Famer Julius Erving to being addicted to alcohol and drugs due to his chronic pain.
How did I get motivated to go from being a substance abuser to being in recovery? I was a financial analyst, so I was analyzing things, and I realized that the mindfulness was telling me that I was really interested in what motivates people, especially myself. I had to learn how to deal with my pain and mindfulness and just cultivating wisdom, understanding the mind-body process. And so I got into it for survival, and then it became not to survive, but to thrive. And I've been thriving ever since. Originally, when I started doing the mindfulness, I worked with people in recovery. At the time, I was working at the Center for Mindfulness. Back in the day, it was called the Stress Reduction and Relaxation Program, and John Kabat-Zinn was the founder and the director, and he had a relationship with Phil Jackson because they used to teach at Omega Institute, because they had just won their third NBA championship, and the stress of all the people coming at him wanting things. Phil wanted someone to come in and help them deal with that, because he dealt with the whole person. And then in the meantime, Michael Jordan's father got murdered and Michael retired. So when I got there in October of 1993, they were in full-blown crisis. So I could talk to them about being in the zone and what it took to have that mental toughness and how to cultivate that, how to train for that. So the mindfulness is the key, because if your mind is not right, even though you have talent, even though you've done the training, you won't have access to it.
With George's help and the return of Michael Jordan a year later, the Bulls went on to win 3 more NBA championships. George then followed Phil Jackson to the Los Angeles Lakers, where they helped Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal win another 3 championships.
I would say mindfulness makes us flow ready. that we need to have a little bit of complexity, and we have to have this willingness to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So we have to play in between comfort and discomfort. And that's when we're moving, pushing the edges of our capacity, that's when we experience flow. And that's why it doesn't last, because the mind and body gets acclimated to it. And so then we got to push further.
Over the past 10 years, mindfulness has become increasingly popular across society and within the law.
Finally tonight, a new tool for police and maybe for you as well. Officers balancing the high-risk stress of the badge through meditation, using their minds to sharpen their edge.
When the chief introduced the mindfulness to us in March of this year, I said to myself, oh, I remember doing that. And because of my years of playing basketball, if I'm able to keep myself cool, whether it's just always just realizing what's going on right now, not what's going to happen, I find that it benefits me on my cause and dealing with the people and the public.
I ain't afraid of you. I ain't afraid of you.
About 4.5 years ago, my life started to spiral out of control, and I had heart pain. I was stressed out. I was feeling depressed. And I tried traditional remedies such as therapy and exercise, and nothing seemed to work. I stumbled across mindfulness meditation at my darkest hour. I tried it, and there was something about it that spoke to me immediately. Then I came across mindfulness-based resiliency training that Lieutenant Gerling was doing in Oregon.
Meeting our distractions without any judgment or elaboration.
Today, Lieutenant Richard Gerling is leading officers and support staff from several departments through his specially designed mindful policing program.
I started out on a quest in about 2003 to quite simply improve the police-citizen encounter. What I found in my own experience taking an MBSR class was that there was something there that was unlike any other training I'd ever experienced, some sort of deep internal awareness and skills that I cultivated in simply 8 weeks of training. And that really set me on this path, working with a lot of other collaborative partners to bring mindfulness to policing here in the United States. Noticing the difference in sensation from the palm of your hand versus the backside of your hand. Maybe there's some warmth or coolness there that isn't there in the palm of your hand. Our longevity, we give up a minimum of 10 years of our life just simply for being in the profession. We have the worst cardiovascular disease profile of any population. We're twice as likely to be clinically depressed as the general populations. We're taking suffering human beings who are deeply impacted by trauma in varying levels, and we're just telling them, hey, go sleep better. Hey, don't drink too much. Hey, be compassionate. It doesn't make any sense when what we do with mindfulness training is we're building skills that disrupt these habituated ways of being that are driven by stress and trauma, and we're cultivating a whole new way of being. And that way of being is maybe best framed as resiliency. I will be in the middle of trauma, and I will be there fully present. I will be there skillfully, and with a period of adjustment when it's over, I will emerge as strong as I was when I started, or potentially even stronger.
It makes us a little more human when we come into that call, and it makes the people we're dealing with more human. And there can't be anything but success that comes from something along that.
Prisoners quite naturally try to protect themselves, just usually with armoring up physically and psychologically and with anger and bitterness. And so it's very hard to connect with that genuine regret and remorse, which to me is what we have to get in touch with for that transformation to really begin to happen.
Notice if you can bring a little more energy in or a little more softness in. Just finding the balance there. Recalling that you have your breath as your ally, your home base.
Mindfulness practice begins to put us a little more in charge of our own physiology to begin with, where you can breathe and get yourself back into a calmer place where you can make better decisions. So that can be life-saving when you're in this environment.
So my name is Fleet Mall, and I'm really happy to be here tonight. I founded what we now call Prison Mindfulness Institute. It used to be called Prison Dharma Network. In 1989, while I was serving 14 years in a maximum security federal prison hospital in Southwest Missouri. And how I got there is some things I have deep regrets about. And I ended up getting a big sentence for drug trafficking. And it was cocaine. And when I first got locked up, I really hit a wall, primarily around the fact that my son, who was 9 years old then, was going to grow up without a dad. I developed this real passion to at least not cause any more harm. And then if I could learn to maybe do a little good.
And it grew while I was in, but it really took off once I got out, when my colleague Kate Crisp got involved, and we started building it into a national organization that today involves about 190 different meditation-based prison projects all around the world.
Take a big breath in. Stretch, stretch up. And then exhale just softly. So we're still breathing, we're still feeling. Same practice, really. We're just moving instead of sitting still. And we can hold our seat even as we move, the more we practice.
Well, who do we want them to be when they get out? Angry, bitter, full of shame, still caught up in all their victim mindset and victim thinking, or do we want them to come out as better human beings? Well, if we want them to come out as better human beings, better neighbors, better citizens, then we better give them some opportunities to do some work on themselves.
It really made this class very special today. Having somebody here that's been in our position before and that knows what we go through in our daily life and actually could get out and head to the streets and do something positive and come back, it's an inspiration. And I just appreciate the fact you're here today and that you gave us some hope of us doing something positive in the future as well. Thank you.
You're on next week with Aware of This Moment.
I'll be, yeah. Ready to roll, huh? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're perfect sitting ducks.
Shortly.
Comfortable closing your eyes, that just helps avoid distraction. If you want to just focus on a book on the table, that's fine. I was appalled to find from 15 to 22 veterans a day in this country taking their own lives. After working with a number of veteran service organizations, I saw too many people still falling through the cracks. I really have to offer this because I know the power of mindfulness, and I know it can really have an immediate and long-term effect. And then very specifically bring our attention to our toes, wiggling our toes, noticing the mobility that we have, the distance between our toes and our shoes. If our toes feel hot or cold, if we notice achiness, stiffness.
The nonprofit Mindful Warrior Project, founded by Gail Sofer, provides veterans, active duty military, their families, and caregivers in the Los Angeles area with mindfulness exercises to help cope with post-traumatic stress disorder, panic attacks, and other ailments.
This is our situational awareness of our own bodies. And we're not trying to fix or change anything, just noticing what's happening. Some veterans can feel like, hey, I'm already too mindful. I'm aware of everything, and I'm on red alert, and I'm scanning, 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 scanning. I don't need to do more of that. There's a difference between being hypervigilant and vigilant with openness and curiosity and not assuming a threat. That's a huge difference, because in mindfulness, when you suspend judgment, you're suspending assumptions, you're not jumping to conclusions, you're really exploring. Don't ever let anyone tell you that mindful eating has to do with the quality of the food. It's the quality of the experience. Just noticing this as if we've never seen this before, as if we're from another planet and we're exploring something.
It helps me have less anxiety, and if I do have an anxiety attack, it helps me to be able to have more control of what's going on in my life.
I use it to make sure that I don't go back into the dark places that I was going to with my PTSD. I wouldn't go into places where there was large crowds or large noise. I couldn't really stand that. The other thing was anger. I was angry all the time. And I didn't like that. So my mindfulness practice actually put me in a place where I could start living again, experiencing what everybody else was doing that were normal.
What I'm going to do is hand you an object, and you may or may not have seen this object before. I can promise you it's edible, but that's all I'm going to promise. The Center for Mindfulness has really been the leader in the field around developing gold standard treatments like mindfulness-based stress reduction to help people, manage their stress, for example. Just notice how much it weighs, what it might look like in your hand. You can even start rolling it around in your fingers to see what it feels like. We developed a program called Eat Right Now that helps people change their relationship to emotional and stress eating so they can break that addictive cycle. See what that tastes like without even biting. And then really paying attention as we take one bite through this thing, feeling the texture, feeling the taste that might be released. Our brains are set up to form habits. The problem is when we get so caught up in these habits, they no longer serve us. If we start eating because we're stressed out, so we're stressed, we eat some chocolate and we feel a little bit better, we're not eating because we're hungry, we're eating because we're stressed out. And that stress can kind of perpetuate eating because we're stressed. It can hack that system. So if we get stressed out, and we get curious, we bring some mindful, curious awareness to that situation, there's a different reward that comes from that. We don't have to eat something to feel better. We can naturally drop into our awareness and curiosity, and that in itself is joyful. So how many of you have eaten this thing? Do you know what it is that I just gave you?
Black garlic.
Black garlic, yeah. Did anybody have a first gear moment in this last week where you noticed any aspect of the habit loop?
The same sort of usual thing, being sort of irritated about teenagers in the house, and they left a big bag of Doritos on the counter, and I just was like telling them to be quiet. So I just reached in and I started eating the Doritos, and I was like, oh, why am I eating Doritos? Like, I'm not hungry, I'm just mad that they won't be quiet. And then I did have a moment where I just kind of, it took a moment to wake up.
With our Eat Right Now program, we had 40% reduction in craving-related eating. That's pretty good. From a behavioral standpoint, we get 5 times the quit rates of gold standard treatment with our smoking cessation program. On a regular basis, I get folks telling me that they've quit smoking, this has saved their life, and things like that, and that's really rewarding.
Welcome everyone. This is our meditation for beginners group tonight. We have a lot of people coming to us right now with anxiety. And anxiety falls into various categories. Someone could come in with a more generalized anxiety, which we call it kind of a free-floating. They'll worry about work, they'll worry about home, their family, their friends. There's other kinds of anxieties, like a post-traumatic anxiety, where they may also ruminate, they'll replay what the trauma was. And so there's specific kinds of tools I can give someone like that This is a situation that makes a lot of people feel powerless. And then you have this. So what we try to do with someone who's in a state of depression is empathize with what the real life situation is. And then what mindfulness and meditation does is to relieve those top layers of suffering, right? If somebody goes, I'm all to blame for this. You hear a lot of all or nothing statements. This is all my fault. So people start to do this like self-blaming, regretting, replaying. Like Sharon Salzberg said, these are the add-ons. If we get rid of the add-ons, I can help you deal with what's actually happening in the present. So that's where kind of this blend of therapy and mindfulness could be really useful for depression.
Now let's bring our awareness once again back to the people around this table. Knowing that everyone in this table shares a special bond. I got my PhD in health psychology and behavioral medicine and began working a lot with people with cancer. All of that has led to the development of a nonprofit organization called True North Treks, where we take young adults with cancer out into beautiful backcountry wilderness destinations where we take them backpacking and canoeing and help them reconnect with their peers who've been through something similar, and then help them learn to connect again with themselves through training in mindfulness and through mindful movement and yoga.
Every night I'm like, what is it doing in there? And like just freaking out and not sleeping. And until, I had to do something outside of my comfort zone, which was, do the trek. And it's the best thing that I've ever done in my life.
We hear the word transform all the time. And it's a combination. It's a combination of being in nature in such incredibly beautiful places. It's about that power of social connection with their peers. And it's about learning to cultivate a sense of self-compassion for themselves through mindful awareness.
Huffington Post. This idea of mindful leadership is provocative. Tell us exactly what that means.
Okay, so the aspirational definition of a mindful leader is someone who embodies presence by cultivating 4 fundamentals of excellence: focus, clarity, creativity, and compassion.
Now every floor in the new Salesforce Tower in San Francisco is being drawn up to include a mindfulness zone.
More and more companies are recognizing stress as an issue and resilience as a goal and mindfulness as a way to get there. So what I want to do today is just give you a brief introduction about what mindfulness is, and then we're going to do a brief mindfulness practice together. The title of Chief Mindfulness Officer definitely gets people's attention, I have to say, and it gets people very curious about what Aetna's doing. Mindfulness can help you to reduce your stress level. And stress is something that affects every part of the body. It affects our heart, it affects our breathing, it affects our digestion, it affects our immune system. It is really an amazing role because what we get to do as a department is, number one, we get to come up really to kind of brainstorm ways of bringing mindfulness to our employees. And number two, we get to think about how to bring mindfulness to our members. So there's over 24 million people who have some insurance connection with Aetna.
Aetna's mindfulness program started at the top, with a directive from CEO Mark Bertolini following an accident in 2004.
I broke my neck skiing and detached the nerve root from my arm that connected it to my spinal cord.
And almost died, right?
They gave me last rites in the helicopter on the way to the hospital.
He became exposed to meditation and yoga as a way to manage his pain. And through that recovery and his experience with mindfulness and meditation and yoga, he discovered not only that he could manage his pain better, but it had a lot of other benefits.
You might imagine your thoughts to be like leaves floating down a stream, watching one leaf at a time as it floats by.
We developed a program in collaboration with a vendor called eMindful. And the program's called Mindfulness at Work. And it meets once a week for 12 weeks. And it's virtual. And during those 12 weeks, you're expected to do a mindfulness practice every day. And what we found is that it significantly reduces people's stress. And we also found that people are able to spend more productive time at work, less time being distracted by physical pain or emotional challenges, over 45 minutes a week more productive time at work. So those things have a big impact on a person's well-being and also the company's bottom line.
If we ever want to solve our health crisis, we have to address the issues of healthy living, because unhealthy lifestyles are causing 50 to 70% of all healthcare costs. So instead of looking for the cure, we need to cure inside ourselves. As we incorporate mindfulness into an integral part of our health programs, I think it's our best shot at improving the overall health of the American people. Around 40 years ago, I was leading a very stress-filled life. I was trying to ramp up the microwave oven business at Litton Industries, and my wife dragged me kicking and screaming to a meditation seminar. Then they said, 20 minutes twice a day. I said, oh, really? So I've been meditating 20 minutes twice a day ever since, 42 years now. And it's been the best thing that ever happened to me. Because at that time I had high blood pressure and it had come way down. But 20 years ago, my wife had breast cancer, and she went through the medical procedures like mastectomies and follow-on chemotherapy, but she wanted something more. Penny launched the Penny George Institute at Alina Health System, the largest health system in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it became a regular practice there. As they would say facetiously, meditation or medication, take your pick. My most creative ideas come out of meditation because you clear away all the clutter, and all of a sudden you can see things clearly. Over the years, student interest has grown tremendously. I'm teaching executives now. We offer a special course in meditation, and it's way oversold. And so it's nice to see how much interest there is. I find among CEOs, there's tremendous amount of interest today. That never existed 10, 20 years ago.
Mobile devices don't have to be a distraction. They can actually keep you centered. We've rounded up some apps that'll help you meditate and be mindful.
What causes people to download and engage with this over time?
Yes, so in the early days, I think people thought we were a bit crazy. You know, mindfulness and meditation felt like a bit of a niche. Would people really pay for it? But my goodness, the world needs this.
People tell me that they sit at home and they let their mind go blank, which is what they think they're supposed to be doing. And of course, our brains never go blank. And they get up and they're like, this is not for me. Might be for that other person who figured it out, but it's not for me. So we built Muse to really help solve that problem.
Instead of dividing and distracting, some new forms of technology have the ability to calm and connect.
This is Muse. We have sensors here on the forehead that pick up your brainwaves, and also sensors behind each ear. It connects wirelessly to your smartphone or tablet, and then when you slip the headband on, actually reads your brain data and translates that into guiding sounds. When you're thinking, distracted, your brain's bouncing all over the place, you hear it as windy. And as you come to clear, focused attention, it quiets the winds. If you stay very quiet, you'll even hear little birds chirping. At the end of your meditation, You actually get to see what your brain was doing every moment.
There are additional guiding sound choices, as well as guided meditations on various topics from leading teachers, including Deepak Chopra.
So I was an early adopter of that. So my boys became interested in the Muse because it's technology, period, because they are very much of their generation. But they also actually really use it and sit in it from a mindfulness perspective.
I hacked into it a little bit and into the process, and I just started using it while I did my stretches and doing yoga, and then doing a workout. I would take my Muse on the subway at rush hour, which is a chaotic situation that frustrates a lot of people. And the goal was always to try to maintain some kind of calm in the chaos.
Put it on like this, and I'm gonna tighten it. I'll often send patients home with a Muse for a couple of weeks of practice, and then I have them check back with me to discuss and explore some of the things that have come up for them.
Interaxon is also looking to take the Muse system to the next level.
In VR experiences, you create a totally immersive experience. I think a great example of this is, let's say you have a fear of heights. So what we can do then is create meditation experiences that allow you to work with that fear directly.
What we're going to spend some time with now is talking about difficult conversations and really grounding this conversation in some work that was done out of Harvard and the Harvard Negotiation Project.
Tech companies, known for being on the leading edge of change, are also embracing mindfulness programs for their employees. The nonprofit Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, or SILI, grew out of the Search Inside Yourself program developed at Google by Chade Meng Tan in 2007. Rich Fernandez joined soon after.
It was kind of just a quarterly offering, but it was getting more and more attention as mindfulness gained momentum. And now we have thousands of Google employees going through Search Inside Yourself.
Google then allowed the program to be expanded beyond Google employees through SILI.
The unique approach in Search Inside Yourself is that we offer secular, science-based mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And we offer this as a set of trainable skills that impact both well-being as well as performance and, importantly, leadership. And they get to interact with their peers in a particular way based on a curriculum so that they can actually see some of the effects this has on things like, listening, building trust, greater collaboration. They exercise what we would call mindful listening, which is to listen with the intention to understand rather than to react or respond. It's possible to exercise mindfulness while you walk.
And the sense of solidity and connection that we have, it can really be accessed when you slow down.
It sounds simple, but it's not easy, because when you try to pay attention to what that experience of walking is like, it's very often the case that the mind's going to wander away. And the attention is going to be elsewhere, lost in thoughts, ideas, feelings, to-do lists.
No one, I don't think, should approach mindfulness or meditation as having a specific prescription. It's an invitation for it to land in the way that it does on each person.
Scott Krenz devoted part of his tech fortune to creating one of the newest retreat centers in the West, the 1440 Multiversity, above Santa Cruz, California.
It's 20 minutes from downtown Silicon Valley, And it's a 75-acre redwood forest, basically. And 1440 is named because that's the number of minutes in a day. And it's about being present and aware for each one of those. And that's a mindfulness task in itself. If we're self-aware and we show up authentically, we can build trust. And if we build trust in relationships, whether it's in your family, in your workplace, in your community, between nations, the world is better. So some of the important work that's made the biggest difference in my life has happened in person, in deep immersion with others. And that's really what Multiversity is here to invite people to experience.
Mindfulness and awareness is a basic human capability that we have that we sometimes lose track of, and we need to kind of get back.
As mindfulness spreads, one surprising place it's emerging is in politics.
We're at a really unique spot, I think, in the country's history where things are so hyper-partisan and there's just a lot of fear, a lot of anger. I got elected to solve problems, and that means working with people who don't always think the way that you do and figuring out a way to listen, deep listening, to really see where they're coming from. Maybe there's something in there that we can agree on, that we could work on together. What first drew me to the practice of mindfulness, you know, I grew up Catholic, I went to Catholic school. It was such a relief for me to say I could keep that and then learn this amazing, develop this amazing understanding of what it means to be a human being. And that was a big relief for me. And that's when I got inspired to write the book, because I thought, wow, this is a secular practice. And so we can teach this in our healthcare system. We can teach this in our schools. This is healing our veterans.
Today, Tim is sharing his thoughts on mindfulness with Sharon Salzberg at an event called Healing the Heart of Democracy.
We have to reconnect because the old ways of connecting are in many ways not working.
I feel like there's a quiet revolution happening in the country, not just the growing appreciation and understanding for contemplative practices. We've got these old systems that were built for a time that no longer exist. We need to all be tapping into what's best inside of us and what's most creative inside of us, and it starts with very simply paying attention. So
we're very fortunate. Thank you.
Happy to see you guys. What a great crowd. Hey!
As the movement grows, it's clear mindfulness really can be used anywhere.
Mindfulness has been great for my stand-up because when I feel nervous or whatever, I don't have to give in to that. I just have to look at, oh, I'm next, and be aware of what's happening, and then just go up and do my thing instead of spinning or making my heart pound. Anybody know about mindfulness? No? But what I'm excited to do now, even take it a step further, is to actually share tidbits about mindfulness without saying, I'm going to teach you about mindfulness. And when I've been doing it, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, my whole life I've been like multitasking, which used to be sexy and hip, but that's so 2016. Because what that means is you're doing everything half-assed.
Lee's hectic life also includes being married to film and TV star David Koechner and raising 5 children.
Before I would look at them like this, where they'd talk to my back while I was at the computer, or I'm driving, okay, Junior. And then all of a sudden now, I'm looking directly in their eyes and they have all of me, and they see that I really see them, and they're almost overwhelmed. I could study with you. My mother was mentally ill, and I kind of grew up, she was locked behind her door. And when I became a mom, I didn't really know what the heck to do with my kids because it wasn't mirrored for me. And I thought, what did I need from her? What would have been my dream is for her to see me and to hear me, to know that I mattered. And from that basic principle has been the foundation of the simplicity that parenting can be.
We said we would keep the homeless in our prayers.
Lee also shares her insights as the parenting expert on Deepak Chopra's digital platform, Jayo.
The two most important things you can do as a parent is to see your child and to hear your child. That's it. It's that easy. And look at my fingers. It's a peace sign. If you do these two things with your child, you will raise a peaceful child to send out into the world.
People have known the experience of being aware for thousands of years, but it's always been a few luminaries in society. Now, because of social media, because of the way we can spread information, that experience, which was a privilege for a few luminaries, becomes available to everyone. I hope you will watch this movie, The Mindfulness Movement, that you will participate in this movement itself. We can do it together, but we can do it only by waking up and being mindfully aware of experience as it happens and mindfully aware of choices that we make.
It was interesting talking with her. I have a lot of material, so we'll see what comes out.
Well, we're going to start the meeting with some meditation first, and then I'm going to ask you another question about that because I'm curious.
Okay. Want me to start?
Mindful magazine editor-in-chief, Barry Boyce, along with publisher Jim Gimian, got the first issue onto newsstands in 2013.
Honestly, it felt kind of crazy because who starts a print magazine in the era of the iPhone? But I think one of the key things is that even though people are very attracted to information that comes through their phones, so many people have come to us since we started Mindful and said, the very fact that I see this and that my mother sees it in the checkout line makes it seem like an ordinary thing. And that's been the mission. Claire, is she a mindful interview or a walk the talk?
We were hoping for her to be a full interview feature.
Yeah. And the cover shoot?
Yeah, so she'll be on the cover. One thing that we really try to avoid is what I call bliss face, which is just someone in this state of ecstasy. You see it a lot in advertising around mindfulness, and it's really not about that. Mindfulness, it can be gritty, it can be celebratory, it can be hard. So the idea is that we'll illustrate each of those little tips in a lively way so that people will get a visual hit of getting outside and finding a buddy. So,
right, cool. Yeah, that's great.
The importance of the digital side is that there's just a lot larger community of people online who are curious about both the practices and, learning more about the science.
If mindfulness were just about getting a little bit of relaxation and checking out, floating away, then I wouldn't care about it. So you get some relaxation, which allows you to look deeper. And that becomes a way of having a more direct and authentic engagement with your life and with other people.
The bus is ready for you.
I'm seeing the bus for the first time.
Let's go. Let's have a look.
This is...
Check it out, for real. I mean, the orange goes with the white.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
After you, sir.
Thanks, bud.
Hi, I'm Dan. Eddie, nice to meet you, man.
Well, basically, that whole back can turn into a suite.
No big deal, just on a 10% happier bus.
That 100,000 people might be actually finding the way to a practice that might help them in some way.
Yeah. I teamed up with one of my favorite meditation teachers, Jeff Warren, and who actually is Canadian, but we did a cross-country US tour. And the goal was to meet people who want to meditate but aren't. So we decided to do this cross-country tour, this kind of gonzo mission where we met people, we met cops, military cadets, teachers, celebrities, and talked to them about what's standing in the way.
How do we get through that barrier?
That is a great. You guys. I mean, that's a very good question.
And sort of we did a taxonomy of issues. The biggest ones are, I don't have time for this, I can't clear my mind, this is self-indulgent, I'll lose my edge, people will think I look weird, and consistency. I started, but I stopped, and now I can't get back on the wagon. Oh, great, cool. Well, you come on in here. We'll give you some one-on-one guidance. Once I started doing it, it was clearly useful, and stopping seemed masochistic even by my own standards. But for other people, it's really hard to get this habit off the ground.
Sounds and thoughts and sensations, no problem. You're just interested in the breath.
5 to 10 minutes a day is often the recommendation for starting. On our app, we have a huge program called 1 Minute Counts, where even 1 minute of meditation is good. It's not only true that 1 minute counts, 1 second counts, because 1 second is all it takes to break yourself out of some trance. I spent a lot of time puzzling over this very thing. All of a sudden, you're not being governed so powerfully by your emotions and urges and impulses. I think that meditation is the next big public health revolution. If a sizable percentage of the population is less emotionally reactive, what kind of impact would that have in the classroom, in parenting situations, in workplaces, in our politics, in our relationships? This is, I think, has the potential to have a genuine societal impact.
It's about developing the art of friendship toward oneself and toward others, toward all of life, actually. And these days, I tend to use connection as a term.
In addition to mindfulness, Sharon has become one of the leading teachers of a related practice called metta, or loving kindness.
And just intuitively, I understood that, in a way, love was what I was seeking, and that, and for me and for many others, that some greater degree of love or loving kindness is the secret ingredient in mindfulness in a very different way. To really have an open mind means an open heart. And the way we change how we pay attention is through the silent repetition of certain phrases. The phrases are the conduit for the heart's energy. They're the vehicle that is going to allow us to be different with ourselves and with others. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Live with ease means in the things of day-to-day life, like livelihood and family, may it not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. This is like the song of the heart. And all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown, may all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. This profound knowing that our lives have something to do with one another. And the implication of that is that everybody counts and everybody matters. Not everyone's going to be my best friend, but everybody matters. And so what would it be like to have a day like that, where we really approached ourselves and others in that way? It's kind of a nice thing to do in the middle of the day, isn't it?
Movement right on 3. 1, 2, 3. Movement right.
allow things to come and go so that we are actually recovering energy, we are cultivating calm.
After helping the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers win NBA championships, George Mumford still works with a variety of athletes and teams.
This is what we've been training for. Manage the moment. You manage this moment, the next moment's gonna be fine. Then you get into a rhythm, you get into a flow. Whatever you focus on grows. So you focus on, it's gonna be great, okay, you gotta feel that. You gotta be a champion before you win a championship.
The wisdom George shares also applies to much more than sports.
I work from people from Yale to jail locker room to boardroom. For me, you gotta be in pain or you gotta be seeking pursuit of excellence. Either one of those, there has to be a sense of urgency. And if you don't know how your mind-body process works, then you have very little chance of living to your potential. If you don't know who you are, you could end up being anybody, and if you don't know where you're going, you could end up going anywhere.
The Rock's like talking about being like the big dog and like lifting all these weights, and then Kevin Hart.
It's the joy of the moment. It's the joy of doing the thing for no reason, for the thing in and of itself. So when we can live life that way, it doesn't matter if we're playing basketball or listening to music or speaking to a loved one. That is the real essence of this practice, is to be done full engagement, full on, full joy, full wonder. And when we can get to that point, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? And it's like these minus.
I'd love to do a check-in today on a couple things. One is the app. We like the kids to prove to themselves that they can do everything because that gives them an intrinsic sense of self-worth.
When Jewel was a homeless teenager, she created her own mindfulness techniques to survive. Now she works with at-risk teens through her Jewel Never Broken program at the Inspiring Children Foundation in Las Vegas, co-founded by Ryan Wolfington.
We actually give them opportunities to struggle. Do you guys want to give an update on the app?
Sure. Yeah. So we have.
They run the foundation, they run the website, they do the fundraising, they do the video editing, they do the marketing. We teach them and guide them, but really they're given the task of problem solving and proving to themselves that they can creatively problem solve. And when they are resilient, when they're tenacious, when they stay with it, that there's tremendous reward. On top of project-driven learning, we give them a psychology for life, to be the observer of their thoughts, to understand that not all thoughts and feelings are facts, to check them, that they can choose which thoughts and feelings to engage in, to live mindfully,
just focusing on
to live with vulnerability,
what's right now,
to live their values, to notice when they're not, and to adjust and to self-correct with kindness. These kids live with a lot of courage. It's inspiring to see.
Graduates of the Jewel Never Broken program have gone on to top universities, including Stanford, Princeton, and Harvard. K-12 schools are also adopting the program.
So I thought it would be nice to do a check-in and just see if anybody feels compelled to talk about what thoughts they've been observing that might be troubling them or thoughts that they've been able to overcome.
I was really struggling with a variety of different things, especially with my relationship with my dad. He struggled with depression and like suicidal thoughts and stuff, and sometimes, he would tell me, you make me want to die, like you're the reason that like I'm in all this pain. And that was really like tough for me to handle because it wasn't only like him saying it, it was a belief that like I had held in my mind for a long time. I tried to take my own life twice, and I would write down like every single negative thought and feeling that I would get in one column, and I would call it the lies. And then in the next column, I would write down what I knew within myself to be true. So that was kind of my first like mindfulness experience.
As we talk about a lot, we're not our thoughts, we're the observers of our thoughts.
Jewel's Never Broken philosophy came from another trying time in her life. After her initial success as a recording artist, and while her mom was also her manager, Jewel discovered she was millions of dollars in debt.
I realized I was broke and in debt, and that my mom isn't at all who I thought she was when I was in my 30s, and it was a really big blow. And it hit me really, really hard. I was walking by a mirror one day at my house, and I remembered this allegory of the golden statue. A warring tribe was coming to a village. They decided to cover their golden statue in mud. The warring tribe came and went. The village forgot the value of this golden statue until one day it rained and the gold was revealed. I remembered that allegory, and it made me perceive myself in a different way. I decided to approach myself not from the premise that I was broken and I had to be fixed, but instead from the premise that a soul can't be broken. I existed perfectly at all times, but I was covered in generations of hurt. And I really, more than fix myself, I had to do an archaeological dig back to myself. And when I approached things that way, healing happened a lot quicker. My number one job was going to be having to learn how to be a whole, happy person, and that I would dedicate as much of my time and my resources to that as I did the pursuit of being a musician.
Thank you, guys. I'm humbled. Thank you.
So mindfulness is a kind of invitation to savor the present moment, not to exchange it for some better moment. And the more you are living in this moment, the more the next moment is colored differently because you've shown up for this one. So that could actually change the future. And in fact, it's the only way to change the future is by changing how willing you are to be in the present moment.
Just get it in your mind you're going to do it. And once you start seeing the benefits of it, and you like the way you act, you like the way you handle problems, you see the difference in the world, you'll be inspired, you'll see things happening, and you'll want that to be your way of life.
So I'd say mindfulness isn't just to get relaxed and to be calm. It's really about cultivating wisdom so that we eradicate or alleviate suffering.
This is how social change happens. When we start being more compassionate and kind, connected to ourselves, more self-aware, these changes will impact every single thing we're part of. And in this way, society can change.
I think a critical mass of people who are living in awareness and where they're aware of the choices they make will automatically create a better world.
Tell the world just one thing, it would be that we're all okay. Not to worry, 'cause worry is wasteful and useless in times like these. It won't be made useless.